Well, good morning, folks. This is going to be a fantastic Leading Your Best Life because I'm with Paul Litwin, and he is the CEO of Men's Talk. We met via our Blokes Talk Beachside, and we ran a fantastic session only a week or so ago. But Paul, let's get into it. Paul, welcome to Leading Your Best Life.
Thank you very much for having me, Leigh.
Right, fantastic. And I know you're up there in Scarborough by the beach at the Men's Talk headquarters. So we'll delve down into that and what it's all about. But Paul, before we get into Men's Talk, two blokes, two men talking, let's talk about the Paul Litwin story. Where were you born? What's been your journey to get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was born in Subiaco here in Perth, WA. I was born from migrant parents. My father was Ukrainian and my mother's Serbian. They both came out in the 50s as part of the migration after World War II. And really literally came with suitcases and nothing else on a 3-month journey across from Europe to WA. And it's really interesting when you're in that sort of scenario. And I've just recently taken my son back to Northern, where they ended up in migrant camps when they first arrived. And I sort of reintroduced him to his culture and his heritage and said, you know, this is where it all began for our family. So it's really interesting to look back and see that. And Northern still has those camps and people can go back to have a look. But it's interesting to show what life was like when they first arrived, and they were literally bundled onto trucks and taken there. And that was really their first place for 2 years before they settled into normal suburban life in Dinella, where they built the first family home. And then everything sort of rolled from there. So I was a mid-60s child. I was born in the mid-60s, and you know, had a great life. My mum and dad worked their tails off and wanted to make sure that we as kids, and I have 2 other sisters, that we as kids have the best possibilities that were given to us: education, sport, you name it, we did it, which was absolutely fantastic. So we were very, very fortunate. I then went through high school, decided at the end of high school that I wanted to have a little bit of a gap year. In fact, it turned out to be about 4 years of gap, and then returned back to study after working in the real world and having a party and having a holiday, and went into teaching. And I got a teaching qualification at the newly formed ECU in the early 90s, and got my qualification to teach both high school media, English and drama. Okay. And then really progressed from there. Had a very good 25 years in the profession, eventually landing up in the sort of career guidance space. And it was interesting from there, Leigh, that I started to see, particularly with young men, the importance in relation to having conversations with them. Because we found that a lot of young men really didn't have much direction, particularly going into post-secondary school, about where they would like to go in relation to career-wise. And it was important to have that sort of discussion and guidance, which then really sort of provided myself that guidance in relation to why this area suddenly became really important to me, and why I wanted to make sure that particularly our young people at the time had the right conversations, particularly young men, had that ability to be guided in the appropriate manner to whatever their career pathway was and to whatever their purpose was.
That whole sense of who am I, where do I fit in, what's my role as a man in society. You know, we don't have the hunters going out and doing the induction as we might have, 500 or 1,000 or more years ago. As you say, so boys get lost. So what led you? So you were teaching career guidance. How did that then lead to this creation of Men's Talk? What was the catalyst for that?
I was teaching right up until about 2018. And then in that year, I lost 3 mates to suicide.
Oh, boy.
All in the 1 year. And you sit at those funerals, Leigh, and you wonder and look and see, look at the community and look at the ripple effect that such a shocking event can have on families, on work colleagues, on sports friends that they played sport with, their mates. The list goes on. And these suicides, there were three different age groups. One was late 30s, one was early 50s, and the other one was 70. Now, all different and all successful in their own rights, and all had and great family relationships, everything, but still they chose to end their lives. And the question became really, really haunting to me was, what are we still not doing in this space that we could be doing a lot better? And considering the amount of money that is being spent in mental health, particularly in the rehabilitation section, and yet that's not equating to less suicides. It's not equating to less mental health issues, particularly for men, because they are overrepresented in the stats. So it was then questioning that. And I really spent probably 18 months going around and I left my work and just ended up doing some odd relief teaching here and there. But it was all then to do research on, if we are going to set up a charity, what is it going to look like? And what would we do, and how could we really make a difference in the community? So that was the whole concept of Men's Talk was being worked on in that 18-month period. And pretty much February 2021, we launched Men's Talk for the very first time.
So what were some of your answers? As you say, all this money is being spent on mental health, and particularly men's mental health, as in overrepresented. What are the numbers there? It's like 70% or 75% of suicides are men. And what we know from the research is that, 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about what's going on in their internal world. So what were some of your conclusions that you came to as to what was missing, and what did you say needed to be done, and how Men's Talk can maybe help plug that gap or part of that gap?
I think it's important that I think community was missing out of the equation, definitely. It's really, and we came up with a philosophy, boots on the ground, because, there's some amazing charities that are doing amazing work, but however, they have become so large, and I use the word monolithic, that sometimes those organizations, and a lot of times, and then speaking to friends of mine, colleagues, networks, the same sort of responses were coming back. They're great in their messaging, but they're not reaching the very community that they need to be reaching.
Boots on the ground, eh?
Boots on the ground. And so when you're hearing that and saying, yep, have great websites, yes, have great promotional campaigns. However, it's at that face-to-face value and at a community level that it's missing. And this was really important for us when we started sort of putting the whole notion of Men's Talk as a health promotion charity, and that's what we are. What was going to be the ways that we could actually implement the boots on the ground and getting to where men are, to not only send the messages and talk about the messages about mental health and suicide prevention, but about what platforms we then used to actually promote those messages. Because we know that men will utilize different platforms and say, hey, it might be sport. It might be, hey, I'm really good into woodworking. Hey, it might be that I'm a chef. I love barbecuing, a sport, art and craft, dance, singing, acting. There's a myriad of ways a man will connect. And what that platform potentially looks at is something that we have implemented in Men's Talk itself to provide men those opportunities to engage in those platforms, but at the same time have those important discussions about their mental well-being.
As you say, talk about act, belong, commit. It's there's a whole range of campaigns, but it really is, as you say, facilitating face-to-face discussion. And what about that saying, they say blokes often talk sideways? So in other words, they're doing one thing, whether it be golf or playing cards or as you say, acting or choir. But in fact, it's the conversation sideways. Going, man, how you going? Well, in fact, just broken up with my wife or whatever. It's versus, unless guys, in the old days, guys would go to the pub, but there'd be the 6 o'clock swill and they'd be so pissed.
Yes.
And then the guy might be crying drunk, but that's not really therapy.
No.
So what have you seen working well in your time now with Men's Talk? What is, maybe without obviously giving people's names away, but the kind of case study experiences or even conversations that you've had or seen being had that have made a difference?
Definitely. Like we launched a program with Bunnings, and that's where Boots on the Ground came from. It was at Bunnings. So
Okay, great.
we go to Bunnings stores once a month to various stores in the metro and also regionally, as well as during Men's Health Week, of course, and Mental Health Week. And Are You OK Day. I'm going to a Bunnings store as part of Are You OK because they wanted to do something, and we are doing that. And the whole thing, Leigh, is that by having that activation at a Bunnings store, and we know that this is going to where the men are.
Go to where the men are.
That is
great.
crucial and key. This is not waiting for men to come to us. We go to them. So the activations, the workshops, the DIYs, the whatever it might be, and setting them up in Bunnings where it's publicly visible, it has and is having an impact. I think since we began that project, which was back in July 2021, we've had over 1,000 conversations at Bunnings whenever we've been there to talk about men's mental health, both with men and women. So this is talking about their well-being for their sons and brothers and partners and grandfathers and whoever, right? Their mates. And I'll give you an example. We were at Bunnings Balcatta. This really sticks in my head. Bunnings Balcatta last year, a week before Father's Day, and it was a Father's Day promotion, and they wanted Men's Talk to be there. And we're in the foyer there set up. And I had a gentleman, he was in his mid-50s, come up to the stand, start looking through our flyers, and then he burst into tears.
Yeah, wow.
He goes, and I said, mate, what's the matter? And he goes, I'm afraid my 24-year-old son is drinking himself to death. And he was on a FIFO. He was doing FIFO work, but when he was coming back down to Perth, it was just alcohol, because you obviously can't drink on site. But he'd gone into this terrible rut, and he goes, what should I do? And I said, you bring your boy home, and you bring your boy here, and you address what the issue is. You work on it together. And then I gave him suggestions of support services that he could get, particularly with his alcohol addiction. And I got a beautiful text about a couple of months later that said, thank you very much for that powerful conversation that we had at Bunnings Balcatta. My son now has left the FIFO job. He has got into rehabilitation in relation to his alcohol issues. He's got a new job, he's got a new relationship, and everything is on the up with him. And he profoundly thanked us and for us being there at that moment. And you know what, to be honest with you, I think that this is a scenario where he could have become another statistic quite easily, that young man.
Absolutely, mate. Talk about powerful conversation, and it's a great example, as you say, of boots on the ground by being there in that space right there and then. And as you say, who would have thought that going to Bunnings on that day could literally change two people's lives at least?
Yes.
The father and the son. Mate, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So let me ask you a question. What motivates Paul Litwin? What motivates you?
I think for me, this is all about being able to help another, particularly a man, whatever that age group of that man is, or his background, whatever. But my motivation is to help and make the change.
Help them make the change. Yeah.
And help to make the change and to help them be the better versions of themselves, not only for themselves, but for the very community that they are a part of. And so whether that's their family, it's their work life, it's their sports team that they represent, it's their mates that they're a part of or group of. It's all of those aspects, but it's seeing that, hey, we actually have been involved in helping another human being be able to be better, and to create something that they can be proud of from a purpose point of view, from financial aspects, from their family relationships, their careers. The list really goes on. But that capacity to make that difference, that really lights my fire. And when I see these men that come back and say, thank you, I didn't know and I was lost, but you've been able to point me in the right direction.
I mean, you're making me think of Newton's law. It says a body remains at rest or in motion until an external force is applied. And when coming in contact with men's talk, they're changing their trajectory.
Yep.
The trajectory that they have wanted to change but couldn't change themselves.
Correct.
Let me just go and I'll share the screen so that we take a look. And of course, this is what we did the other week. We did the Blokes Talk Beachside meeting where Alan Park spoke, which was fantastic. But if I go to the Men's Talk homepage, there it is. There it is, folks. So mtalk.com.au. Let's talk about it. Get in touch. There it all is. So check it out. And tell me a bit about what the thinking behind this website is.
Look, it's very much about the platforms that we create, and so that men understand. You look at that photo there, you're just scrolling by, that a colourful one. Look at the sky there.
Beautiful, yeah.
That just sort of reminds us of the type of activities and events that we put together. That's one example. That particular picture was taken last year at the World Suicide Prevention Memorial Service and ceremony that we did for men lost to suicide. Let's be honest, suicide is still one of these dirty words that we love to put away in a cupboard or hide or not talk about because there's shame and stigma that's attached to it. And what's one of the things that we were really passionate about at Men's Talk is say we need to change the focus of the conversation so that we actually do talk about it and that we have an opportunity then to actually say, all right, there is changes that can be made. And it's through events like this event, which, by the way, is coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, it's coming up very soon.
Yep, that we can actually bring the community together to not only remember those men that we've lost, but also to advance the conversation around suicide and say, we need to work together on this, Leigh. There is no one organisation or one person that has the silver bullet answer to what suicide is.
No.
We have to work together. We are stronger together when that actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So just on that, clearly, many people go, how could a person get to that stage where they want to end their own life? What's going on in their head? How could that be? Even to the point where some people say that's incredibly selfish. What in your experience, having obviously three close mates and probably others around, what do you think the journey is that someone's on when they get to that stage, and then what can be done to avert that? So let's just start with, what is that mental process, the internal world, the pain that they're in? What's been your research? What have you found in regard to that?
I think it has to be really clear for men is to outline, and we do have men, obviously many men that come through the hub, which we'll obviously talk about as well later. But when we see men, and particularly when we see them one-to-one and they say, I'm really feeling, really, really bad, or I'm really feeling poorly mentally. And in some cases, it's even suicide ideation. And it's really important to then extract why they are feeling that way. What is the root cause of this? Is it a financial cause? Is it a relationship cause? Is it something that they have been aggrieved because of past trauma in childhood? What is it? What is that root cause that is causing the issue or the problem? Because until we can start to address that, Leigh, then it just can be which unfortunately is with a lot of the fixes at the moment. It's like, oh, well, a one size will fit all for mental health. And, you know, we can just go, here it is, and everything will be fine. That's not the case. And there is differences, and we are all different, and we all have different experiences through our lives. And one of the things, and again, another sort of philosophy for Men's Talk is we are a womb to tomb charity. So that means we are looking at the point of when that boy was in his mother's womb and then following his life all the way until the end of his life. And we know for a fact that throughout that man's life, there's going to be transition points. And what are those transition points? From boys to adolescence, from adolescence to young man, from young man to middle age, from middle age, to fatherhood, from fatherhood to middle age, from middle age to senior years. And then addressing those issues, as we had that talk on Monday night, and there was a transition point right there where men who retire lose purpose and don't understand what retirement really is and what they can be doing in retirement, because they've all been so involved in work as their purpose that they don't have very much else to fall back onto. So the balance isn't there. And there's just one example. And then we can follow that all the way down as well in relation to the other transition points. It is about understanding those transition points that we can then understand what that problem or issue or the seriousness of the issue is for that man.
I like that point you make, to transition points. So as you say, whether it be transition point, boy going from school to work, or
Correct.
work to relationship with girl or partner, parenthood. Also, they've now got a kid to look after and a family, or two, then the second kid or third kid, then possibly divorce, then, you know, as you say, right through retirement, and then there could be health problems, or mum or dad goes, or brothers or sisters gone. So as you say, it really is, those transition points are at points where the man, the boy, is so out of the comfort zone. I'm out of my comfort zone. Can I cope? Who do I go to? And as you say, a mentoring relationship, which I suppose you as both a teacher and career guidance is so important, isn't it? So let me just ask you, in your life, what were some of the mentoring relationships and some of the powerful conversations that you had along your journey that shaped you?
I was very fortunate to have quite a few teachers, both in primary and secondary school. It was a little bit more difficult with my dad because he was forever working, and I don't blame him for that. He worked, and he worked his tail off to make sure we had the life that we had. However, I obviously did differently when I became a dad, because I didn't have to do that sort of strenuous work and sort of at the expense of having some sort of an effective relationship with my son. And I made sure that I had that relationship with my son, and I obviously still do, and that it is open. I can chat and talk and watch him play sport and do all the things that my dad unfortunately couldn't do because he was working constantly. I was lucky to have a family, very strong influence with my uncles, who were very, very good teachers, male teachers who were excellent, that I had a couple that I really, really admired, and also that became very good role models. And then obviously I wanted to pass that on. So when I was teaching, I followed that line myself. And I've got ex-students that have become best mates and friends with me, even though I was their teacher initially. And I then became a male role model to them. And it's like that perpetuation and that continuation. It's that handing over the baton and going, okay, this is now what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and of
And
course, role modeling is so important in males and females. Of course, is to have people to look up to. Interestingly, of course, the number of times I study sports champions, and the number of times you see all music champions, they've got some rock star on the wall that they've admired, and they end up something like it themselves. And the same with whether it be David Beckham and Pelé, or Ronaldo and Pelé, having them on the wall. So males and females, we need those role models. So coming back to powerful conversations, as you say, now men's talk, you have the hub. Let's talk about the hub, and let's talk about what the plan is and the types of conversations that go on at the hub.
So I think what's really, really important, the concept of the hub really was from the very moment that we started the charity. In my mind, it was creating an alternative to shoving men to doctors and saying that doctors or GPs were the ultimate answer. Of course, GPs are important in the conversation, but not potentially as a starting point. And particularly if you are troubled in some aspect of your life, in that sort of early intervention and prevention phase, there didn't seem to be anything at that point that men could start off with. And then obviously, if they still were not right in that sort of initial discussion and having conversations and mentoring, to then have the next phase of saying, well, I think then you need to have more professional assistance. This is what we would suggest. Here are the referral to GPs or psychs or counselling or whatever it might be. But it's really importantly to have that beginning point that a lot of men, wouldn't even think, as you said earlier, a lot of men wouldn't even think about going to a doctor when they would have their initial issues in their mind. And I think what became clear when we first floated this idea with the Mental Health Commission of WA, the lady, Maureen Lewis, is the commissioner, she used to be a mental health nurse. So she actually got it. And she said, it's so important that we need to absolutely concentrate on men being a priority because they are, and they're overrepresented in all the stats, and that we need to have more focus in men and for men to be able to provide the support services that they require, because the research has clearly told us that they do not access those support services in the same way as women do. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really important to have some sort of a platform, in this case, the Catterton Blue Mine Place, which is not only here in Scarborough, it's part of a pilot, an 18-month pilot that's here in Scarborough and also regionally in Busselton. And it's there to provide that mental health support. It's there to provide mentoring programs, information and resources, workshops, events and activations, both here at the hub, but we also have what we call our outreach programs, where we go to those suburbs that don't necessarily, where the men would access those services anyway. So the Armadales, the Kelmscotts, the Maddingtons, Mirrabookas, Nollamaras, Kwinana, Leda, Aurelia, Coodnup, Mandurah, those places where, in outreach, we can get to them. And once again, it's that whole thing of we're going to where the men are.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you go to, let's say, Armadale or one of those places you've mentioned, do the local council contact you? Who contacts you? Or how does that happen? What catalyzes that?
We contact the local council and we say, look, the program is set as an outreach, and that is to provide, it's called men's life skill workshops. So it is to provide an opportunity of looking at their purpose, what is their financial knowledge, effective communication, career management. So some really key areas, and we do that as a half-day workshop from 9 till 12. And we sit down and we actually have different specialists that actually talk in their area of specialty and say to men, when we talk about financial literacy, do you understand, how about budgeting? What about loans, savings? All of these sort of key basics, which would be lovely if they were taught in schools, but they're not.
Yes.
And I hear that over and over and over again when we do these workshops. I wish I had this knowledge when I was younger, and I wouldn't have made the mistakes that I've made if I'd known this information prior. And I'm like going, here's that opportunity, raise awareness, create that important, positive community to then have these men to be armed and empowered with this knowledge.
Beautiful. There's so much that we have in common, Paul, in terms of, helping people lead their best life, the whole idea of empowerment, giving people knowledge, but at the same time, catalyzing them into action. So it's not just about get some knowledge, but just on that, I love asking people about books that they read or sources of information or books that have influenced them. So from your point of view, has there been any key books or podcasts or sources of knowledge that have really influenced you, or even what you're listening to or reading at the moment that have been really useful and talk about empowerment? Yeah.
Look, I think I don't go past Steve Biddulph, the gentleman that wrote Manhood, the original Manhood, and now the new Manhood. And I was very, very fortunate to meet that legend. Now, he was in the psychology space in the 1970s and was doing amazing work with men all the way back then. And we're talking about over 50 years ago. And he was already doing that work in that space. And to be able to speak to someone, and he's an international author. I mean, his books have been translated to so many languages, Chinese and Spanish and French, and the list goes on and on. But the way that he influences from the point of view of talking about manhood and the journey, and he talks about transition, and that's where I learned about that whole scenario about men's transitions. And I'm like going, wow, this is really important, and we should really take this on board when we're looking at this, particularly at men's mental health and their well-being. So Steve's an incredible, you talk about male role models. I fanboy that man because he is just absolutely incredible, and he's been doing the work for such a long time. The other book that really influenced me that I read, that really set up the hub concept here by the beach, was a book called The Blue Mind.
Okay.
And it's written by a marine biologist in the US. And it really sort of shaped me in relation to what the connection to water is, and particularly to a lot of men, whether we're in it, on it, or walking alongside it, that it has a profound effect on our brains. And he even talks as deep as when we first dive in the water and our head hits the underwater of the ocean, and how that makes us feel initially, but also what chemicals are released in the brain because of that particular action. And I'm like going, that's really powerful. And it really sort of guided us to say, this is why the hub is by the beach, both here and also at Busselton, because it is a different approach. It's non-clinical, and it is an opportunity to actually then say, look at this. I call the ocean, and I'm sure you do too, Leigh, because I know that it is a passion of yours. I call the ocean aquatherapy, and it really is.
Absolutely. Well, it's mind, body, spirit. And of course, if you're doing it with other people, it's mind, body, spirit, community.
Correct.
And as you say, it's activating the serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin. All of the great positive chemicals are happening when you do that. And I was glad you mentioned that the other day at the Blokes Talk beachside session, of that incredible link with water and ocean and mind and mental health. So just on that, Paul, in terms of your own daily routines to manage and optimize your mental health, what does your day look like, and what are some of the things you consciously do to optimize your serotonin and dopamine and mental health?
Probably it's all about creating very good habits, and it's teaching other men to do that as well. So for example, and these are simple things, Leigh. An example, it's not when you wake up, the first thing you're reaching out for is your phone. Actually, the phone stays in the kitchen, and I always have mine powered in the kitchen. So
Feather.
that is not the first thing that I go to. The first thing that I do, I don't live by the beach, unfortunately, that I'm rectifying. However, I walk outside. I walk immediately outside and I'm bare feet and I ground and get that grounding and that sense of presence right that moment, rather than joining onto a phone, which then sends us off into whatever the emotional state that message alludes us to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like going, you know what, that can wait.
Mm.
This is about you and how you ground and how you start your day.
Yep. So
And having that, and it's so easy to do because we all can do it. We can all have our bare feet. We can walk onto the wet grass or whatever it is. But to be able to actually do that, smell the air, feel it, understand it, listen to the birds, listen to the wind, feel the sun, or whatever it might be, take a moment. It's like three to 5 minutes, but it actually works because
absolutely.
it's creating presence, it's creating grounding. Then throughout the day, it's like having that ability to continue reconnecting. I've told a lot of my friends, and particularly male friends, I will never do a 9 to 5 office job ever again. Never.
Why not?
I'm the most happiest that I have ever been. Why? Because number one, I've found my purpose and I understand what I want to do and how I want to make a difference in this world, and particularly helping other men to do the same and to be the best versions of themselves. But also the ability for myself. So here, if I'm here, I can jump into the ocean at midday and go, well, I'm just closing the door for about 20 minutes or whatever, and jumping in the ocean, feel the sunshine, maybe rain sometimes because it's raining, but I am in that water. I'm in that water every day.
Yeah, brilliant. And doing that in the middle of the day really does energize you and freshen you up for the second half of the day as well, eh?
Big time. And it works. So works. You're not feeling that drowsy, I'm going to have a nap time now in the middle of the afternoon, as I hear other men talk about. And so I hit a wall at 2 o'clock. And it's like, okay, so what have you done here? What have you done to energize, to breathe, to do a little bit of meditation, whatever that might be? But what have you done?
Yep. And I hear you have a group of guys that you do some swimming or dipping in the ocean with up there at Scarborough as well. Is that right?
Yes. So we do this thing called Move, Breath and Connect, and it's a fortnightly catch-up. It's girls as well, so we do boys and girls. And what's the beauty of this is that important word that we've used quite a lot today, and it's community. And for a lot of men, isolation and loneliness is a serious epidemic. And we hear them say it to us and say, you know what? Even though I'm married and I have children and I work, I'm the loneliest that I've ever been.
Oh, wow.
And when you hear that, Leigh, you're like then going, let's create something. And the Move, Breath and Connect, we started pretty much at the start of the charity when we started the charity. And what came very, very clear from it was the power of that connection, the power of building community. And we do it every fortnight. And in fact, somebody laughed and said, it's a bit like church or what church used to be. And now what we've done is created, every fortnight, 8 a.m. at Scarborough Beach at the amphitheatre, we are there.
Fantastic.
To do the breath, to do the movement exercises, to jump in the water and feel how great that is. And then we'll go and have a coffee and a chat and create community. In some cases, and particularly when we head towards summer, we can have nearly 100 people here.
Goodness gracious, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's only going to get bigger and bigger.
It is free.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's
brilliant.
the key here.
Mate, that's fantastic. Well, you can see the power and it goes, people are having a mind, body, spirit, community connection, which, as you say, is what some people may still do at church, but it was certainly what they used to do. But when you can make it a whole body experience of getting wet, it really activates the whole mind, body, spirit. Paul, as we move to the home straight, Is there anything I haven't asked you at this point that you'd like me to ask you to make sure we cover?
I think probably what the future holds
Correct.
and what what we'd like, particularly from, our number one goal is obviously the prevention of suicide.
Yep.
Realistically, I know there's some organizations, they go, yeah, we want zero suicide. I think that's a very, very long way away, and it could be even intergenerational away. However, if we are able to begin to reduce the statistics, if we're able to introduce better intervention and better prevention strategies, particularly for men, so that they understand that reaching out is normally not abnormal.
Reaching out's normal. Yeah.
Yeah, reaching out is normal. And you know what? Because you're a man, it's okay to reach out. It's okay to have emotions. And I really talk about it from a humanistic point of view rather than genderifying it and say, oh, well, it's okay for girls to cry and boys not to. I turn around and say, well, we have been given the ability to cry, to laugh, to have all of those emotions and feelings because we are human beings. It's not genderfied. It is because we are human beings and it makes us different in the animal kingdom. So if we have those feelings, then they are natural and we are born with them.
Correct.
And it is not about conditioning to say, well, because you're a lady, you can, and when you're a man, you can't. We've got to get rid of that and just put those stereotypes and stigmas to bed once and for all.
Absolutely, mate. You reminded me literally yesterday, I was on the phone to a mate of mine who'd sent a text through that his brother had just died on the night before. And I texted him and then I rang him and he rang me back and he's crying. And I said, mate, cry the tears, hug the family and cry the tears. And because there's a saying that says the body weeps the tears, the eyes do not show. That when you hold it in, it comes out one way or another. And it's way better to come out as tears than it is to come out in either anger or some illness. So, the body weeps the tears, the eyes do not show. And it's big boys do cry and should cry. And I remember back when Bob Hawke was Prime Minister, and there was a couple of times he cried, and people, oh, the Prime Minister cried. But, the vast majority of the country said, mate, he's showing that he's a human being. He's connecting. Don't underestimate. He's tough, but at the same time, he's a human being as well, and that's an important piece of role modeling right there. Can I ask you this question, Paul? If you were to be able to talk to the young Paul at the age of 13, what 3 or 4 tips would you give him now that you know a lot more? What 3 tips would you give a 13-year-old Paul on how to lead his best life?
Oh, look, I would have done it a whole lot differently for sure and certain. And I would have really, this whole aspect of looking after one's well-being, I wish I'd known that right at the very beginning. And, I hope that I've taught my son to be better understanding of his well-being because I wasn't given that opportunity to understand that. And none of us really were back then. And we're talking about education in the 70s and early 80s. And it's only just recently that well-being has really come into vogue. And, I think we've still got a long way to go when we're talking about that. However, if I had been able to be given that sort of knowledge about well-being, I think I would have been able to cope with various issues of my life up to that particular point and even up to now in a much different way compared to what I actually went through back then.
No, we're all evolving. I was saying to a guy today who wanted to have a coffee. He said, first of all, he asked me, Leigh, how are you? I mean, I want to talk to you. Are you looking after yourself? Because he's saying you're looking after all these other people. What are you doing? Because then I talked about the things that I do in terms of the meditation and the yoga and the community at Pod Squad and the whole range of conscious things that I do myself there. But so being very conscious of that. But I'm going to get back to the how to get hold of you. people can touch base with you via the website, the Men's Talk website, and there also you are on
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. So there's two ways people can get hold of you, and certainly pop into the hub up there at Scarborough, or as you say, down at Bustleton. It's fantastic, mate. You're doing a fantastic job, Paul. I'm just going to go through some of my notes here to summarise people all the way from Northern. As you say, mum and dad coming from Europe with a suitcase. That's talk about a transition point. That certainly was tough on them, and then working, but going, mentoring and career guidance, and having those powerful guiding conversations. Firstly, with young men who'd lost direction and purpose or were confused, but now with men of all ages. And I love that idea of boots on the ground, go to where the men are, places like Bunnings and a whole range of other areas. And this 18-month pilot you've got going, let's hope that it gets ongoing support and it really becomes the seed for a whole range of other initiatives around the country, helping people make the change to live their best life, to be the best version of them, the best version of themselves. And as you say, we've all been touched by mates with suicide and major figures. And we do need to talk about it. My mate Neil Cole was the person that first got me involved in this way back before Beyond Blue, when they'd done work in Victoria on the Depression Awareness Research Project. And as you said, it's about destigmatization and the great work you're doing, as you say, in reaching out. The blue mind, the power of the ocean, and as you say, bare feet in the morning, just grounding, let alone powerful conversations. Paul, it's been marvelous talking to you, mate. Anything you'd like to do or say to summarize before we wind up?
I just wanted just a general message, and that's to all men, as it is for you, Leigh, that is to really make certain for a lot of men that they are not alone, and they never are. Yeah. And you know what? A help, assistance, advice, support is really a conversation away. And I think it's really, really important now more than ever that we are having that capacity to reach out, and that as a community that we embrace that, because really healthy men are healthy communities. And without healthy men, we don't have healthy community. I think that's really, really crucial.
Yeah, healthy men, healthy fathers, healthy communities, healthy role modeling, all of those things. Paul, you're doing a marvelous job with Men's Talk, and I look forward to us partnering and continuing to work with you, working on these very same issues of helping blokes and human beings in general be the best versions of themselves. Absolutely. So that we can have the best communities that can be the best versions of themselves. Mate, I really appreciate what you've done, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thanks all the same. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Yeah.